Hello, I'm Isaiah Allen. Welcome to a discussion, an on-point discussion on vocation. And we have some great guests that are going to be able to share from their own lives and experience. And we're going to be interacting over a video on vocation. And I just want to give a brief introduction. Matt Baker and I work at the THQ, USA Eastern Territory, in the Lay Leadership Department. And originally from South Africa, but also at THQ, is the co-director of Salvation Factory, Envoy Sharon Bussey. And joining us from Lexington, Kentucky, an Army soldier and a young banking professional, Sean Williams. And at the College for Officer Training, across campus from me right now, working with youth there. Joining us for her second On Point is Cindy Pettiford. And then a bit new to the Army, we have asked an outside guest, Nathaniel Welch, to come along and share. And I just want to begin with whoever wants to share a brief definition of vocation. It's not something that everybody talks about. It's not a word that's customary. So please chime in, share a brief definition.
All right, so my definition, I would say it's thinking about how you can use like your work, your occupation, thinking about how you can use that to kind of spread the gospel, spread the ministry.
Mm-hmm. Great. Who's next?
I think my definition is, this is obviously a really loose definition, is doing something that you're made to do, recognizing it, and walking it out. I think would be loose definition.
Something you're made to do. Sounds like you had been thinking about it. Something you're made to do, thinking about it, walking it out. So it's rational and so forth. And yeah. And Sharon?
I think for me, vocation, kind of that idea of vocalizing. So it's being able to recognize that God has vocalized a call on your life and understanding what that calling is. And in the Salvation Army, we often define that in terms of officership currently, but historically, we really defined it as a life dedicated to the Lord. So I think about Romans 12 that says, take your average, everyday, ordinary life and give that as a sacrifice to the Lord, a living sacrifice. So that's kind of all the thoughts that bombard my mind when I think about that concept of vocation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And Matt, you want to add anything, or Nathan? Good. Nope. All right. Well, in that case, we can roll right into the video, listening to the voice. What is the?
Yeah. So this is a video. Maybe we should say this video. I pulled this from the Work of the People, and there's this guy Marlon Hall. And some of you might have known him. I hadn't heard of him before, but I thought it was a great video, and I thought it would serve as a great sort of like catalyst for conversation for one of these on the topic of vocation, which I think is, something we don't spend much time thinking about or thinking through what the implications are for the life of the church and whatnot. But here, so we're going to watch a little bit of this video. We're going to stop. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to do that a couple times over the next 45 minutes or so. All right, so here we go.
Worship is life. So when people come to a worship service and it feels authentic, that means that the people who are engaged in the worship in the building are hoping to live authentic lives. Jesus, is that you?
Let's keep coming back.
Worship is your life. It's when vocation and calling, like your faith and your work collide. Like that's what I'm on right now. Like right now I'm on some old like for me, worship is not so much, even when we think about emotive church, good worship for me isn't so much A and a B song selection by a choir and an invitation to come to the altar and to sling snot and to slip on the snot on your way to the altar as you lay prostrate before the Lord. Like, that's not all worship either. Like, worship is a realized dream. Worship is when you do what you were born to do, and what you're doing makes an indelible mark on humanity that no one can erase because no one can make it but you. Worship is when, because of the art that you do, because of the administration that you do, because of the architecture that you do it so divinely artfully that human flourishing comes about. And humanity is not the same because of your everyday life, your Monday through Sunday life. Like, that is worship for me. Worship is vocation. It's vocare. It's when you sing the same song on Tuesday during a board meeting with how you do your work as you do on Sunday morning in your worship. That's worship for me right now. Worship is vocation, becoming one with your belief. When you do what you love for a life and for a living, you worship the Almighty God.
How does the church nurture that?
Right now, the church don't do nothing to nurture that. The church is anticlimactic to people authentically embracing their own vocation, because we are taught that a call to ministry means a call to a local pastoring, and that there is no call outside of that. Now, that's what we're taught. We're taught that if a person raises their hands and say they have a call to ministry, that person is the one who should be preaching in a year after having gone to cemetery for an extended period of time to lose their faith, to somehow miraculously get it back again.
All right. So that's the first bit. Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. What did you hear there? I think I began talking about this as vocation, looking for definitions of vocation. He equated worship and vocation, started out there, and said something pretty scathing about how good the church is at nourishing that. And any responses to that?
I think what I appreciate about what he's saying is the connection to worship as being a lifestyle, that it should bleed into and impact all of our lives. He definitely comes with a very jaded perspective of the church. That's not been my personal experience in the Salvation Army. I've felt very much empowered to fulfill a very unique calling that God's placed on my life. I think one of the things that surprised me was how long it took him to get to the concept of worship being about God. I felt like a lot of what he was saying was very self-focused. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but it was a lot about, I think he actually said it's becoming one with your beliefs. And it was very much driven on personal feelings, personal perspective, personal preference. I'm not sure how vocation is, kind of living a dream per se, as opposed, I just felt Christ was missing from a lot of his definitions. I don't know how you guys felt about that.
Yeah, let's hear.
Yeah, I agree. I felt the same critique, that Sharon shared. It seems to me that it's hyper individualized. His understanding of vocation and ministry and belief in the church is hyper individualized, which I think is just a broader critique that I have of even the notion of vocation in general, which is I think that it's oftentimes married with a certain economic understanding, so that what it means to have a vocation as a calling, we really, I think, only understand that in terms of what does that mean for my job? You know what I mean? Like, what's my job? What's my role? And he even said it, like, if you can take the feelings that you have in church on Sunday into your job on Tuesday. And I think that that's important. And there's a lot of religious traditions that have a similar sentiment. But I think that by beginning an understanding of vocation in the context of sort of I don't know, the economic structure that we live in America is inherently problematic for a lot of reasons. And I know, Matt specifically asked me to be on this panel because of my experience with people with disabilities. And we have plenty of time for me to get in there and talk about that. But I just wanted to echo what Sharon was saying, that I do hear in what he was saying some problematic things. But overall, he's very passionate and energetic, and I liked what he said. But
yeah, and he's got more to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
right.
And I think that one of the issues, even as I think about vocation, is it almost is a very individualistic kind of a thing. What am I called to do? What am I born to do? What am I created? And yet there are other ways that we have to think about that. You want to add something there, Cindy?
I was gonna say, because I've actually, in my lifetime, obviously I come from a very Salvation Army background. My mom's a Salvation Army officer, but I've also gone through different denominations. So I think in the context of the Salvation Army, it's very easy if you're in a ministry vocation for it to be nurtured. I think that that's definitely something that, which is why before we were talking, that vocation of like, what does the church do, was something I had to wrestle. But I've gone to churches where women in ministry was not allowed. And so that kind of tone set like what your vocation could be or should be. And I've been to, very Pentecostal churches. So I've gone to a few different churches where I think it's been very different than my experience when I was called into ministry. I think that it's really difficult in the context of, at least I see in the Salvation Army, if you're not in a ministry context of your vocation, to feel nurtured by the church. I don't necessarily see people who are teachers or other, occupations really celebrated in a way as far as walking out your vocation. But I do feel like for myself, so I kind of feel like a little bit torn as far as operating in youth ministry. I feel like that is something that's very nurtured in the Army, something that they have a lot of resources for, something they do celebrate. But I definitely feel mixed feelings. So I get kind of what he's saying in a lot of ways, but I also have had different experiences as well. So
I think all of you have pointed out, have made good points and pointed out some problems and maybe some things to be critical of in what he's saying. But going back to what's the first thing Sharon said was like in an affirmative sense, like making this connection between worship and vocation, right? He kind of connects the dots for us really quickly, really for us there. And he says something that stuck out to me about people wanting to live authentic lives. I thought that was important. And I mean, we can sort of ask the question of what that means and what an authentic life is or what it looks like. I think it can mean different things. But I think in this context, authenticity may mean that the life in the work of the church was not meant to be limited to like one particular sphere, right? So that different places like the marketplace, school, whatever, are now like legitimate sites where one can respond to God, which is an act of worship, right? So I hear him challenging to some extent this kind of assumption that you can kind of compartmentalize out these different spheres, and there's more that could be said on that. But I think when I hear a more authentic life, I hear at the same time like a more integrated life.
I like the word. When I hear authentic, I'm hearing the integrated, like you said, one that doesn't separate. I'm a Christian, and I bring that Christianity, those commitments into every aspect of my life. I want to see, Sean, do you want to add anything? Not to put you on the spot, but.
I think kind of what y'all been talking about. I really like his point on like thinking about how you can not just have your worship on a Sunday, right? So just thinking about how like throughout the week, how you can challenge yourself to kind of practice what you preach. So not only worshiping on Sundays, but maybe worshiping throughout the week and like doing that through your work. And so like through your work, you're showing people that you are believing what you do.
Yeah. And maybe we can segue into another section of the video, but also think about what in what ways do we actually live that out? Do we find ourselves living that out? Especially in some maybe non-clergy sorts of vocations.